All right, hello everyone. It is a special week this week. It's our 16th episode at the Author's Dilemma podcast and at Facebook Live show. This
Sweet
week,
16.
yeah, sweet
Yay.
16. We made it 4 months, guys.
And we're still friends.
And we're still doing this crazy thing called this podcast as well as writing. Yeah, it's almost like you find a hobby you enjoy, and then it becomes like a gluttonous kind of like you just keep doing it for whatever reason. All right, so
Crazy.
like I said, for those of you that are watching tonight, please be sure to say hello, and if you have any questions, put them on the comments. We'll try to answer as best we can. And for those of you that are listening at some other time, be sure to hit us up on our email because I'm sure you may have questions after tonight because we have a special guest and we will introduce him shortly. First off, I am J.E. Jack. I write urban fantasy and paranormal thrillers.
I'm Hyrum Hawks, and I write hard sci-fi and sci-fantasy.
And I'm Jennifer Carr, and I write Christian romantic suspense as well as clean contemporary romance.
And on this week's show, we have a very special guest, like I've already said, and I will let Hyrum Hawks introduce him.
So we have Robert Zangari, who is the author of a variety of books, is most in the Legends of Kalda universe. I met him at a convention a couple months ago in Provo, a writing convention, so that was fun. Turns out we have a lot in common. We both actually studied bioengineering at the University of Utah, though I quit after 1 year because I was a little more easily swayed that bio is garbage. It's good for other people, but not for me. But then he actually became an author over time, so he figured it out a lot younger than me, and I'm jealous of that. So I'll let him give a little more background on himself.
Well, thank you guys for having me on the show. I appreciate being here. So I've been writing for about 15 years, I think. And my first publication was 14 years ago. Self-published a martial arts book that I used to promote my martial arts school. And I got it done really quick. It was, I think, from inception to publication was about 4 months. And my dad has been working on the Legends of Kalda fantasy universe for the last 33 years, since 1991. He's been working on these. And so after I got it published and got a few sales, not really much, but enough to cover all the production costs and bring in a little bit here and there, he was like, do you want to come help me do some writing? And this was in the summer of 2011. And I was like, yeah, sure. Let's do that. That'd be a lot of fun. And like Hyrum said, I was going to school for biomedical engineering at the time. And I thought, yeah, I kind of want to try this because bio's hard. There's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on in that major. And
yeah, I know the same professors you're thinking of.
Yep. Oh, so anyway, I thought, yeah, why not? This would be fun. I had seen my dad working on these books and on these stories for years, and I always thought, oh, that'd be really cool to be an author one day. And I remember, I think it was either my junior or senior year, I remember having a dream that my dad and I were writing together, and we were on an interview in this dream, and we were talking about how we were doing books together. And I had given him some advice and not advice, but input and some feedback on the stories that he was working on. And I made a couple characters that I kind of inserted into the storylines and helped him kind of design this pyramid fortress that people will see in our third book, Elven Secrets. But I never really, at the time, I never really thought, oh, that's not my career path. I'm going to go be an engineer like my dad. My dad's an aerospace engineer. So I thought, that's what I'm going to do. And then when we started working together, I was like, this is a lot of fun. I like working with my dad, and let's just go do this. And so it was probably, it was at least a couple years ago that I decided I'm just going to write full time, and this is what I'm going to do, and do do my best to make it work. So that's
Nice.
me.
So you said that you started off with the martial arts. I'm just curious which art.
So it was a mixed martial art between Jeet Kune Do,
Okay.
Wing Chun, Kung Fu,
Hmm.
American Karate,
Yeah.
and Togakure Ryo Ninjutsu.
Okay.
So
All right.
Those are words.
the bulk of it was mostly ninjutsu that I learned from Stephen Hayes, long distance. So his
You know,
Toshindo program.
you can't see the bookshelf, but I have a few of his books. Like, right.
Oh.
Well, it doesn't matter, but it
Very
doesn't matter.
cool.
Yeah. No, I know Stephen Hayes. Well, I mean, I know of him, but
Nice.
that's really cool. Yeah. No, I took
So-
Kenpo for a little bit and some other arts, but anyway, get back to the writing.
Well, it's interesting. I want to ask a question. You're only the second engineer I've known that has switched from, like, I'm trying to switch. There's a lot of buyer's remorse in me for all the years I spent as an engineer. What was it that where you think like an engineer, but you're also an author? How did that happen? How did you decide? Wow, I can use this as and that.
I think what really, when we first started writing the stories together and we were designing things, not just settings, but because I also dabbled in architecture. So being an architect was kind of one of my fallback potentials. And so I would, I would approach a lot of the world building from an engineering standpoint, and some of it, like our magic system, it's not really complex. It's not like what Sanderson would do, but it's more what you would find kind of like in a D&D setting, or something like that. But yet there's a lot of the things that we have built in the magic system have been, okay, well, if this, then that. And so we've kind of approached some of the, as far as the magic and the magic technology that we use from an engineering standpoint. But it was probably, I would say it was that first year I was like, we could really incorporate that, because being an engineer, you got to have an understanding of the world around you, how things work, a basic understanding of physics. And so when you do that and you innately put that into your writing, into your stories, it makes things feel more real and more plausible, I guess. So that was probably my first year, like I said, that I really felt like it was coming to. But when I was developing our prequel novel, which is the Prisoner of Tartalum, the primary setting for this book, we really approached it with an engineering mind. And so we were like, okay, so we want this thing. This is a prison that they're going into, that this left over from this ancient civilization that was far more advanced than what our current characters are at. And so essentially the idea was, well, let's make it a miniaturized, multi-layered Dyson sphere that has some qualities of like a Rubik's Cube. So there's like a little bit of a puzzle to each of the floors. And the time that the different floors change will rise on an asymptotic curve. And so, we really approached it from, okay, how can we math the crap out of this thing? And
That's really in depth. I have a question.
I've got your first book sitting on my shelf, and it's intimidatingly large, but at the same time, I read the first few pages and I'm like, okay, I got to get into this just as soon as I'm not overbooked myself. But yeah, I love
the TBR list. It's everybody has the monkey on the back.
Yep.
So I'm curious. You said your dad started writing. When did he start writing?
He started it was in the 90s, in 91. And it was these stories that we're working on.
Okay.
But they're technically what are gonna be 7, 8, and 9 in the series.
Okay.
So he started kind of in the middle, and he wanted to do these flashbacks to the books that we have that we're currently working on.
Right.
And he had written a first draft of the first book in that trilogy to one of his fellow engineers that was she was a mystery writer, I think. And she was looking at it and said, Dan, you're starting like in the middle of the story. You really should start earlier. And he's like, yeah, I was, kind of taking inspiration from George Lucas and wanted to jump into the middle of the story. And she's like, no, you should go back and start from the beginning. And that was in 2000, 2001. So it was somewhere in 2001 when he decided he was going to do that.
Okay. So I'm just curious, is he traditionally, are y'all traditionally published, or you still indie publish, or?
No, we're independently published.
Okay. All right.
So we had
That's
gone
awesome.
through the gauntlet for about a year and a half when we're like, okay, let's just do it how we want to do it. And that was back in 2012.
Man, I wish I started back then. So your books are obviously epic fantasy, high fantasy. Is that all you write, or do you write other genres, or is that
that's
all?
Primarily what I write. I do want to branch into some more sword and sorcery, shorter fantasy. I love sword and sorcery. I love that type of short, quick, fast read, as opposed to what I write, which is, like Hyrum said, this huge sucker.
Which I will note, using the what's the kind of paper you use that makes them so they don't feel like you're carrying an entire brick?
Yeah, the groundwood.
Yeah,
from Ingram. So we print them with Ingram, and it's a 35 weight groundwood option.
That's awesome.
I picked his book up. I'm like, I was expecting to pick up like a lead weight. This is not. This is as light as some old paperbacks. There's a little
interesting.
So yeah, definitely consider that.
So from start to finish, how long does it take you to, like that book you just showed us? I mean, obviously you have a lot of backstory that you're filling already, so you already have a pretty good idea. But once you start writing it, you and your dad, which I also want to hear how that works. Like how does it work working with a co-writer? But before we get to that, how long does it take for you from start to finish? I know that's kind of a hard thing to, but.
So a Prince's Errand I started this like from conception. That was in March of 2018.
Okay.
And I finished it in November. But I also took like a 2-month paternity break when my daughter was born.
Oh, awesome. Congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So that was it. It was all about 7 months of actually writing, and then another like 3 months of doing my edits before I got it ready to the editor, and then another 3.5 months for our editor to go over it, and then probably another week for me to implement all the edits and do any little rewrites. So it was about like a year and a half from start to finish. Granted, the other ones have not gone as smoothly. The prequel novel took about, let's see, I started that one in August of 2019, and I didn't have it completely finished and back from the editor until February of 2021.
Okay. So the first draft, how long? So, okay. All right. I'm kind of curious about your writing, your process. What does that look like?
Because we have a big spectrum here.
Yeah, because we everybody does it differently here.
Since I'm working on. Okay, I'll give a little bit of background. So, Prince's Errand, the story concept for that never existed in what my dad and I originally published 13 years ago. It was kind of alluded to, and there was we were also again starting in the middle, and so it was okay. We knew what we wanted to do, and by the time we started A Prince's Errand, we'd already written 4 novels in the series. But they're totally different, right? Style and different tense, so it doesn't actually fit with what we decided to do for A Prince's Errand, which is a little more in line with what people that are reading epic fantasy would come to expect. And so when we started working on A Prince's Errand, we knew the basic structure. So we said, okay, here's the premise. And then I came up with a rough outline, and then talked to my dad. We went over the outline, we workshopped it, went back and forth, changed a few things, and then just kind of hammered out, okay, these are the different chapters we want to go through. And at first, I had it written out to be like, okay, this was going to be 40 chapters long. And by the time the book is done, it was 74. So our outlines are a little more fluid. And we ended up taking some of the we didn't really add much, but we took those outlined chapters and like cut them in half and said, okay, this is about the size of, where we wanted a chapter to be. And then we said, okay, this is a good break to cut it. And then we just went from there. So I handled the majority of the writing, but my dad and I together plan everything. And then when I finish writing something, I'll send it to him.
Right.
And then we'll discuss it and then kind of plan for the next chapter and go from there.
So, I guess with high epic fantasy like that, you have to have an outline. Like, that's pretty much, yeah. I'm a pantser myself, so I sit down and I only focus on writing 500 words a day when I'm in a project. That's all I can do. That's all I can, especially with a day job, right?
Stupid day jobs.
Yeah, stupid day jobs. But which I'm grateful for.
Right.
For any of my coworkers watching this, I'm grateful for it. It helps me pay for all this. But anyway, so anybody have any other questions?
I was going to say, has there ever been a time where when you and your dad are working together where y'all just had it out over something you didn't agree over a scene or something like that?
Kind of. So when we were wrapping up our prequel novel, and the end was, we had planned it to be a little longer than what it was, and we were already really pushing where I wanted it to be. It was at the time it was like 185, and with the outline we had, it was going to push it to like 210,000 words. And when we initially plotted it out, it was only supposed to be like 120,000 words.
Oops.
And so we decided. So we were like, I came up with an idea that shortened it, and my dad was like, "But we have this, so what about that?" And I'm like, "Well, technically, we can actually bypass that entire thing because of this particular aspect of the magic system. And if Amundal utilizes that, which at this point in the story, he's gotten." I won't completely ruin it, but he's at a point where he's a little more knowledgeable about things, and it's not natural. So it's like it would make sense that he would make this leap. And so, but and so we kind of had this back and forth of this, and kind of like that meme that you see where the both the guys are arguing this, and they're throwing the chairs back and forth. Not as heated, but we're Italian, so we get expressive and very emotional, and so it's we didn't have, it wasn't that bad,
right.
But that was about the only thing. But most of the time, we're actually on the same wavelength, and I will think I come up with this really cool idea based off of one of his notes or something, and I will pitch him this amazing idea that I thought I had just invented, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I actually envisioned it that way. I just never wrote it down."
I wrote that in 1997, son.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well, I mean, that works.
Yeah.
I don't care who gets the credit, just it sounds cool.
Just put it in the
Yeah.
book. That's awesome.
That's pretty cool. I'm kind of jealous. I think it'd be so awesome to have, especially someone like your dad. I mean, that's so cool to be able to have that legacy, that experience that you can share together. I mean, heck, it's hard enough writing by yourself. I mean, well, I think writing with someone, although it have its own unique challenges, I think that would be, a much better experience. Maybe I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not.
Depends on
I
who you're
think-
collaborating with.
It depends on who it
Yeah.
is, obviously. Yeah.
Yep. And I think the reason why it works so well for us is because our view on a lot of things in fiction is relatively the same. And that's because my dad raised me with, hey, here's are the books that I read. You should read them too. And so I'm
Yep.
coming from that similar view of things. And I think that really helps. Whereas, if it was two different worldviews as far as what it comes to
Right.
fiction, I could definitely see a clash there.
Oh, listen, could you imagine me writing romance with my dad? Like, he's this super conservative Southern pastor. Like, no.
I would
Yes.
pay to read that. Actually, no, I'd pay to watch the process.
Listen, well, I mean, I consulted him. Like, in my first two books, there's murder, mystery, suspense, and I was like, hey, I need police protocol for XYZ, because he used to be a police officer, and so those, we can collaborate on that all day long, but we're gonna leave the romance out, because he was like, I blushed so hard when I read that. I'm like,
Make sure there's space for the Holy Ghost between those two.
Yep.
leave room for Jesus.
Yeah, you gotta fit a Bible between you. And then the
Right.
joke was,
That's right.
what, on
Oh.
microfilm.
Oh, that's funny.
Woo, that's hilarious. So anyway.
Uh, So did you and your dad play Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, no, I did too. Like, well,
Yep.
not my dad, but I played it growing up. So I think that's where I developed a love for, like you're reading all the Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms. That's the books I grew up on. Sorry, just a side note. I'm just curious.
Well, that leads
Yeah,
me to
actually-
ask, what were the books that y'all read that
Right.
influenced the books that you're writing? Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of what my dad's ideas for this came about from playing D&D, and he envisioned it as, okay, if I was creating a campaign setting, what would it be like? And that's where a lot of the ideas rose. So some of the characters and the settings have actually gone back to even to the early 80s.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so he had these maps that he drew up, and I remember him getting them out when I was little, when I was like 5. So I was 5 in 1991. And so he had these maps that had been folded up and stored away, and he was pulling them out when he was first starting to write. And I still remember him getting the typewriter out and setting it on the dining room table and
Wow.
starting to write all the outlines of stuff and putting his ideas down. And so a lot of it came from playing D&D, and then we played. It was 3.5, I think,
Mhm.
in the early 2000s.
Mhm.
And then we also played all the Baldur's Gate and Icewind
yeah.
Dale games together, and we played EverQuest and EverQuest 2.
Ah,
And
yes.
so we definitely have a lot of inspiration from.
Did you play the new Baldur's Gate?
I have it, but I have not played it yet.
It's pretty good. pretty good.
It looks great. So
Yeah, no, it's I think I'm the only other gamer in this room with you, so I think we get each other, but the other two, yeah.
I don't let myself be a gamer because I played World of Warcraft near the beginning, and I was like, this is crack
Oh, well,
cocaine.
it is.
I
That
will
was
never play again.
Now, the thing I like about video games, and just because, well, it's like a book, but it's choose your own adventure in a way for some of them, because the story is so good, you get wrapped up in it, and that's that's why I play it. But or play different games. There's something
Some
else.
of us just actually read real books.
Yeah, well,
some of us will listen to books while we play.
Oh, multitasking way.
just depends on the game,
Right? Yep.
Have you thought about making a campaign resource book for your world?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, that's something. So originally we were going to kind of try to develop our own system, and then when 5th edition for D&D came out, and we were like, well, let's actually look at that. And so we started putting some things together. And then a couple of years ago with the OGL fiasco,
Mhm.
then we were like,
Yeah.
I don't know, but might lean closer towards something like Pathfinder.
Yeah.
But definitely, that's actually been one of my um, side projects I've kind of been working on as far
Mhm.
as developing stuff. And so we've got it kind of mapped out to be maybe a core book. We have a lot of different creatures
Mhm.
that we like to come together with. So we've got like 60 unique creatures that we developed for the series so far. So we probably have like a complete bestiary. And then with our magic system,
Mhm.
a whole compendium for that. So we figure, at some point, that's definitely something we want to do.
Mhm.
And I do a little bit of art, but not a whole bunch. But the unfortunate reality when looking at some of those is the getting the art made for everything,
Right.
and you're looking at possibly up to $100,000 worth of
You know,
art being created.
I mean, if you look at the old, like,
Oh.
original Dungeons and Dragons, like, they were drawing my kids.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they're like 16, 17, it's all amazing. No, the reason why I ask is I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was the self-publishing podcast or self-publishing formula podcast or whatever it is. And they had a guy on there that does quite well making compendium books. And I was like, oh, and then listening to you, I'm like, oh, that's right up your alley since you've spent 30 years on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got all the stuff for it. Just got to be put together and have a good playable game.
Right. So what are your biggest things that you've learned since past 10 years? Like, what have you learned in your process? What, if you were to start all over, or if you were to do things over again, what would you have done differently?
I would have done more to emulate what the current bestsellers are doing
Right.
rather than trying to do something unique and different. And that I'll explain a little bit more why. And I mean, mostly not necessarily in the story, but just the way it's presented.
Right.
So our original, when we started writing, we had a omniscient third perspective. And so this is part of the reason why the writing got inflated, is because we were used to telling stories where we could easily flow in and out of the characters and around them and just kind of be able to narrate things really quickly and just have this very fluid motion, which you don't really see that nowadays. Everything is mostly limited. And have a true omniscient, a lot of people will say, oh, that's just head hopping. And so you kind of get dinged for that. But the other thing we did was we decided to go for a present tense because it allowed a lot of the action scenes to be more immediate. And since then, I've still been able to take that type of immediacy and translate it to past tense. But I would totally, if I could give myself any advice back then, I would say stick with whatever the people at the Super Elite at Tor, whatever they're doing as far as style, follow that.
So no second person.
No, I mean, I think they can work, but I think for epic fantasy, I don't think it does really well unless you're doing like a YA fantasy with epic. But I think
do some wild
traditional
stuff with YA, yeah.
Yeah, it's
enjoy that
definitely readers in this specific genre are stuck in their ways as far as what they're used to and what they're used to over the past 20 years. And so since the early 90s, there's been that shift from omniscient to this limited third. And that's the first thing advice I would give myself. Second thing would be find a writing mentor sooner rather than later. Because for 5-6 years, we were just kind of doing whatever, not really finding much success. And then I started working with David Farland, and things just changed. And so it was like a night and day difference.
How did that relationship work with your mentor?
So at first so Dave taught classes, and that's how I met him. He was doing a signing I actually saw a commercial and on TV that he was going to be at FanX, or it was our Comic-Con in Salt Lake. And I had a booth there. So I was like, well, we're like, let's just go ahead and I'm going to go meet him. And so anyway, met him there. That was 2015, but I didn't actually start working with Dave until 2017, late 2017, early 2018. And that was, I just was like, I'm just going to take all of Dave's classes. And that evolved to, okay, I recognize you in every single one of these classes, to becoming friends and having a relationship where I could say, hey, Dave, I'm working on this project. I've got some questions. What do you have for advice as far as what to do? And so, and Dave was such a person that he was just very giving to everybody of his time and knowledge. And so he was very open to helping other people.
No, that's good.
And I wish I would have had that sooner, just because that would have done a lot more. I think I would be in a better place at the moment if I had done that in 2011 versus 2018.
And for those who don't know, David Farland did pass away a number of years ago, but if you go to apex-writers.com, you can see his courses. I took a course from him, and I'm still processing. When you pay for it, you actually get his whole spectrum of courses, and so I just opened it up, and there's dozens of courses that I need to take, and I probably should be doing that instead of writing, and so I can actually learn what I'm doing and then write. But
well, you can also learn along the way. I love the one thing I love about Dave's classes is it's all hands-on, and you can apply it as you go, and it's fantastic. And it's he was a fantasy science fiction writer, but a lot of everything that he taught is just like really key technique, and it can enhance your ability as a writer. He's responsible for a host of things. He taught Brandon Sanderson. He taught Stephanie Meyer. In fact, Brandon and Stephanie were in the same writing class. And then James Dashner, who wrote The Maze Runner. And Brandon Mull, who wrote Fablehaven. Pretty much like every single fantasy writer that has come out of Utah in the last 20 years has been a student of Dave. So, yeah.
It's too late for me to move to Utah.
I don't write fantasy, so there's that.
You're more than welcome to get out of the heat. I mean, it's still hot here, but it's not here.
Yeah, it's just a dry heat.
The irony is, me and Robert live on opposite ends of the same city in Utah, but we didn't know each other until we met at a convention. So that's irony.
Which and that brings up an important point, and that's why it's important to get out and go to these conventions or these events where you can get around other authors, is because that's how you get better. Because you learn things from people. I mean, and that's the whole point. And I beat this horse dead. This is why we have the show, is so we can all come together weekly and talk about what we're learning and the people we meet, like Robert Zangari.
Absolutely. You do have to be willing to put yourself out there. Like, that's scary. It's scary, especially as an author, because people are constantly judging you and your work, and you just have to get past that and say, look, I know I have a gift, and there are other people out there that I can connect with. And so then you land places like this.
Yeah. So. And then eventually you start connecting up with other weirdos like yourself. And
and then you start a podcast.
And then you really start going for the goal. Well, all right. So we are about 35 minutes in. Is there anything that you guys could think of?
I guess tell us what you have coming up next.
Tell us where we can find you, and tell us
after you tell us what you're coming up next. Also, give us a last why new authors should have hope.
Yes.
Okay. So you can find all of my stuff at Legends of Kalda, KALDA.com. That's our website. It's got all the information we have for upcoming releases, which one is severely overdue, which is this book right here. This one, I'm hoping in the next couple months to get it out to Kickstarter backers and then release it live to the world, and get it off to our narrator, Michael Kramer, to get the audiobook done.
He's your narrator?
Ooh, Michael Kramer.
Yep.
Dang. So for those of you that don't know Michael Kramer, he's the one that does the Robert Jordan. I'm correct, right?
Sanderson.
Yeah, Brandon,
Yep.
yeah. Dang. That's fantastic. Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
I would
So
be
the-
interested to hear about that on some other time, as far as like just the business side of it. Like how does that work? And like I know how it works, but
Yeah.
how
How did
we
it
probably
work?
want to talk about on air, but
Yep. I would definitely love to chat about that sometime. So
wow.
I love chatting audiobooks because I'm going to side tangent. Audiobooks is one of the things that nobody really has a lot of resources or a key path of.
Mhm.
This is what to do. This is what you should expect. Here's the numbers as far as what you're actually going to get paid in royalties. And it's, yeah.
Now,
It's
are you
a
on
huge-
are you on ACX? Are you exclusive to ACX, or are you wide?
We were exclusive and we did really well, but a year and a half ago when Sanderson came out and said he's not putting his books on ACX, we lost over 80% of our Audible revenue, and it's not recovered. So we decided, okay, what are we going to do?
Wow.
And we decided we'll just go wide, and we sell our audiobooks on our website, and we get 97% of the royalties there. We got them up on YouTube as well, which it doesn't really generate that much per reader, but I don't think there really is a crossover between audiobook buyers and YouTube listeners. I think they're
Right.
two separate markets.
Yeah.
But you can potentially have a listener migrate over and become a supporter.
Well, it's all about building that readership, right? I mean,
Yep.
that's the yeah. Wow, that's really cool. Man, that's a conversation for another podcast probably, but I mean, we could probably talk all night, but we do have to, nip it at some point. All right,
have to go
so
with that.
So give us our words of wisdom.
yes,
Oh, yes. Why you guys should have hope. Okay. Why anybody should have hope being a writer. And, our words really can make a huge impact on someone else. And we're here in this echo chamber. And I think you
Speaking
could probably
of
hear
echo
my
chamber,
it's
yeah.
screaming in the
Echoing,
background.
yeah.
words and screams.
And we have this, we're in a void most of the time. I'm lucky enough I can pass things off to my dad and be like, hey, what do you think? But for the most part, we're writing just in solitary, and
Mhm.
we don't know what our words are going to say or how our stories are going to impact people. And I mean, if you think about it as an author,
Mhm.
I mean, as a reader, sorry, if you think about it as a reader, look at the books that touched you.
Yeah.
And more often than not, that author probably had no idea that they were going to touch you. And this might even be, a book that's 100, 200 years old, and that author's long dead. And
Jane Austen.
but it imparted something to you that
Mhm.
was special, that you needed. And I believe that every one of us has stories that can touch other people around the world, and even people that aren't even on this earth yet.
Yeah.
And so I think just know that there are people that want to read your books. There are other people like you. If you like certain things, the chances are, and if you write similar things to that, there's other people that are going to like what you read.
Yeah.
And that's hard in the moment, but you just got to remember, hey, there's other people out there.
Yep.
You might not see them, but they're there.
Absolutely.
You stick with it long enough, they'll be there.
100%.
All right. Well, Robert, man, we really appreciate you being our first guest and taking a chance on us.
Thank you.
And man, I really enjoyed hearing your story. And just thanks.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much for being.
All right. So everyone, thank you so much for spending your time with us this evening. I hope you got a lot out of it. Like I said, if you want to shoot us an email at authorsdilemma@gmail.com, we would love to hear your comments and your feedback. Until then, we'll see you next week. Have a great and blessed week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.